Welcome to Tom's story. Let's dive right into today's story. They say trust is the foundation of any marriage, that it's the bedrock on which everything else is built. I believe that for 8 years, 8 long years of love, commitment, and shared hopes. In all that time, I never doubted Lisa. She was my wife, my partner, the mother of our 2 children. I thought I knew her heart as intimately as I knew my own. And yet, here I am, sifting through the wreckage of a life I once held dear, realizing that the foundation I relied upon was never as solid as I believed. Our downfall didn't come in the form of a screaming match or a long-buried secret that exploded overnight. It started quietly, almost innocently, with one conversation that shifted everything I understood about Lisa, and about us. If anyone had told me that my marriage would unravel because of a single conversation, I would have laughed in their face. But that was before I learned the hard way how a single moment can ripple into devastation. It was an unremarkable evening. Lisa and I were lying in bed, winding down after a long day. The only sounds were the subtle hum of the ceiling fan and the distant laughter of our kids, Emma and Ben, who were finishing up their bedtime routine. I was half distracted, scrolling through my phone, thinking about tomorrow's workload, or maybe about the leaky faucet in the kitchen I still hadn't fixed. That's when Lisa turned to me, her expression oddly intense, a combination of excitement and uncertainty that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She cleared her throat softly, as though summoning courage. "Tom," she began, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "Mark and Jenna invited us to a party this weekend." Mark and Jenna were our neighbors, a friendly couple around our age, always hosting barbecues and game nights. I didn't think much of it. "Oh, did they?" I mumbled, only half interested. Maybe it was another cookout or a simple get-together. But Lisa hesitated. She was watching me carefully, as if afraid of how I'd react. "Yeah, but it's not your typical party." She took a breath and glanced away, then back at me. "It's a swingers party." I let out a short laugh, certain I must have misheard. "You're joking, right?" Lisa's expression didn't change. She wasn't smiling. "You can't be serious," I said, pushing myself upright. "Lisa, that's..." "Why not?" she cut me off, crossing her arms defensively. "We've been in a rut, Tom. It's the same routine, day in and day out. Don't you think this could be fun?" She tried to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in her voice. I blinked at her. "Fun?" I replayed her words in my head, trying to grasp the full implication. "Lisa, do you even hear yourself? You're talking about sleeping with other people." She shrugged, though her posture was rigid. "It's not like it means anything, it's just for fun. Mark and Jenna swear it's brought them closer." She was trying to sound upbeat, like she was offering me a new hobby. "I don't care about Mark and Jenna," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm not interested." End of discussion. But it wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Over the next few days, Lisa wouldn't let it go. She dropped hints like confetti, cornering me at the most inconvenient moments, while I was unloading groceries, responding to work emails, or helping the kids with their homework. "Just think about it, Tom," she'd say, a pleading note in her voice. "One night. That's all I'm asking." It was as if she thought if she repeated it enough times, I'd eventually cave. My resistance only seemed to stoke her determination. She kept selling the idea, talking about how it was a chance to spice things up, how other couples were doing it, how it didn't have to change anything between us. But to me, it changed everything. It undermined the vows we made, the trust one cherished. By Thursday, she dropped all pretense of persuasion and simply made a declaration: "I'm going." We were in Emma's bedroom when she said it. Emma was drifting off, and Lisa's voice sliced through the quiet like a blade. "You're what?" I hissed, ushering her out into the hallway so we wouldn't wake Emma. "I'm going," she repeated, raising her chin defiantly. "Why don't you just come, too? It'll be fun." She said it like she was daring me, her eyes glittering with a mix of challenge and something else, maybe desperation. My stomach churned. "What about Emma and Ben?" "We'll hire a babysitter." "It's not a big deal," she replied with maddening nonchalance. "Not a big deal?" I almost laughed. Lisa, do you really think this is okay? That this insanity is good for us? Yes, she said firmly. You're just too uptight. Maybe if you came along, you'd see that it could help us. I stared at her, a creeping sense of dread coiling in my gut. Help us? Help us how? By watching you with another man. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. But I noticed she didn't deny it. We glared at each other in suffocating silence. That was the moment I realized the woman in front of me wasn't the Lisa I'd married. Something had changed, or maybe I was only just now seeing the truth. Our tension escalated over the next few hours. Whenever the kids were out of earshot, we argued in hushed but heated tones. I laid it out for her: if she went to that party, we were done. I refused to be in a marriage with someone who wanted to share herself in such a careless way. You'd throw away our marriage over one night? She asked, her voice trembling on the edge of fury. That's pathetic. I'm not throwing it away, I shot back. You are. Don't you see that? But she didn't see it. She rolled her eyes, flipping her hair over her shoulder, acting like I was the one who was overreacting. I'm going, she repeated. And that's final. I remember feeling a surge of despair. This was the person I pledged my life to, the one who held my heart in her hands. Yet it felt like she was driving a wedge between us, and for what? A thrill? Something to break the monotony. I felt a looming sense of finality, like a curtain dropping on everything we'd built. You go, I whispered, and I file for divorce. She didn't back down. Fine, she said, tossing her head. Then do it. I should have expected her next words, but they still blindsided me. Relax, Tom, she said, her tone suddenly turning almost mocking. If you're so upset, I can record the whole thing for you. That way, you'll see it's not a big deal. You'd, what? I stuttered, too stunned to form a coherent response. Lisa shrugged, like she was offering to bring me leftovers from a restaurant. I'll record it. You can see for yourself that it's just harmless fun. Who knows, it might even turn you on. My vision blurred with anger. My throat felt tight, and my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: betrayal, disgust, heartbreak. And yet, in the midst of that storm, a calculated thought crept in: if Lisa was foolish enough to record herself cheating, it would be all the evidence I needed in a divorce. I forced myself to look as indifferent as possible, schooling my features into a mask of resignation. Fine, I managed, keeping my voice even. Whatever you want to do. She blinked, clearly thrown off by my calm acceptance. Just like that? She asked, suspicion in her eyes. No more yelling. No more threats. I shrugged again, feigning a casual air. If it means that much to you, go ahead. She studied me for a beat, then nodded. Fine. I will. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away. The night she left for the party felt surreal. She got dressed in this tight black dress, something she hadn't worn in years, pairing it with heels she barely touched since the early days of our marriage. She took extra time on her hair, her makeup, carefully painting her lips a bold red. The transformation was unsettling, like she was stepping into a role I'd never seen her play before. I sat downstairs, pretending to watch TV, my heart pounding as I heard her footsteps click down the stairs. She didn't spare me a glance. I'll be back late, she said, grabbing her purse. Don't forget your camera, I said, unable to resist the bitter jab. She shot me a glare but said nothing, and then she was gone. The moment the door shut, I stood up, my mind whirring. I dialed my mom, my voice shaking a little as I asked her if she could take Emma and Ben for the weekend. I gave her a vague explanation, something about an unexpected emergency. My mom didn't ask too many questions, sensing the tension in my voice. In record time, I packed a bag for the kids, quietly ushered them into the car, and drove off to my parents' house. Emma, perceptive as always, asked me if Mommy was okay. I told her everything was fine, just that we needed a little time apart. It nearly broke me to see the confusion in her eyes. When I returned home, the silence was suffocating. Every corner of the house felt like it was steeped in betrayal. I poured myself a stiff drink and sank into the couch, staring blankly at the dark TV screen, imagining what Lisa might be doing at that very moment. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of the front door opening. I hadn't really slept, just dozed off in fits and starts. Lisa walked in around 10, wearing the same clothes as the night before. Her hair was a mess, her eyeliner smudged, her dress wrinkled. She looked disheveled but oddly triumphant, a smug smile dancing on her lips. She dropped her purse on the counter and leaned against it, eyeing me with a kind of self-satisfied confidence. "Well?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "Well, what?" I replied, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. She pulled out her phone and waved it at me. I recorded it, just like I said. My stomach lurched. "Great," I forced out, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Go on, watch it," she said, passing me her phone as though it were a trophy. I didn't trust myself to speak. I grabbed the phone and turned away, heading toward the stairs. As I made my way up, she called after me, suddenly noticing the quiet in the house. "Where are the kids?" she asked, looking around as though she'd just realized they weren't home. "At my mom's," I said, not bothering to turn around. "Didn't think they needed to see you come stumbling in like this." She let out an exasperated sigh. "You're so dramatic, Tom. It's not like they'd even notice." I clenched my teeth and kept walking. In our bedroom, what used to feel like a sanctuary, I plugged her phone into my laptop and began transferring the files. My hands trembled as the folder filled with video clips. I stared at the file names, each timestamp capturing a different moment of her betrayal. A morbid curiosity compelled me to watch. I had to know the extent of it, had to confront the harsh reality. The footage was shaky but painfully clear. The laughter, the casual flirting, and then the acts themselves, no room for misunderstanding. I felt sick. Fury and heartbreak warred inside me. My marriage, the one constant in my life, was shattered. But amid the wave of pain, a cold clarity took root. Lisa had handed me the smoking gun, and now there would be no denying what she'd done. After watching enough to confirm my worst fears, I ejected the phone and closed my laptop. My soul felt hollow, like every ounce of hope had been drained. I took a moment to steady myself, then headed downstairs. Lisa was lounging on the couch, scrolling through social media, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. "Here," I said curtly, handing her back the phone. She smirked. "See? It's not a big deal, right?" My voice was ice cold. "I hope it was worth it." Her smug grin wavered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll find out soon enough," I muttered. I turned on my heel and walked into the kitchen, pouring another drink. My hand shook as I raised the glass to my lips. This was it, this was the end, or at least the beginning of the end. The next step was calling my lawyer. The divorce process started almost immediately. I reached out to a reputable attorney I'd found a couple of years back when we were drafting a basic will. They agreed to meet me the next day, and I arrived in their office with the video evidence in hand. My lawyer's expression grew grim as they watched the first few minutes. When they turned off the screen, they simply said, "We can work with this." I felt a mixture of vindication and deep sorrow. Meanwhile, Lisa tried to act like she still held the cards. She seemed convinced it was all just empty threats. "You're being ridiculous, Tom," she told me more than once. "This is a knee-jerk reaction. You'll calm down, and we'll move on." She was wrong. I had the kids stay with my parents longer than I originally intended. I needed to distance them from the tension in the house. I, too, crashed on my old twin bed in my childhood room for a few nights, wrestling with insomnia and heartbreak. One evening, my phone lit up with Lisa's name. I stared at it for a full minute before answering. "What do you want?" I said, exhaustion weighing heavy in my voice. "I miss you," she replied, her tone so casual it made me grit my teeth. "I made a mistake, okay? But it's not too late to fix this." "You didn't make a mistake," I said, voice trembling. "You made a choice." I hung up before she could respond. Filing the papers was both liberating and soul-crushing. I handed them over to the server who would deliver them to Lisa. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. Our life together, house, kids, holiday memories, was unraveling in real time. But the videos replayed in my head, reminding me there was no going back. In the days that followed, Lisa's facade cracked. She alternated between anger and desperation. One moment, she'd lash out, saying I was throwing away our marriage over one tiny lapse. The next, she'd beg me to come home, to talk to her, to let her explain. But there was nothing left to explain. When the court hearing approached, Lisa tried to argue that the swinger party was consensual and that I had known about it beforehand. She claimed I'd even agreed to it. But my lawyer countered with the direct evidence, the texts, the date-stamped footage, the arguments we had via text about how I was absolutely not okay with any of it. The judge's expression made it clear whose side they were on. In the end, Lisa's cavalier attitude and the indisputable proof sealed her fate. Custody of Emma and Ben will remain primarily with Mr. Thompson, the judge announced, finalizing a draft agreement that gave me full custody. Lisa would have supervised visitation until further evaluation. She'd also walk away with far less than she'd hoped in terms of alimony or a settlement. I should have felt triumphant, but as I stood outside the courtroom, paperwork in hand, I just felt numb. A part of me died in that courtroom, the naive belief that love and trust would always see us through. After the divorce was finalized, I moved into a small but comfortable apartment closer to my parents. They helped me take care of Emma and Ben when work got crazy. My days were a blur of school runs, soccer practices, therapy sessions, for me and the kids, and long, quiet evenings where I tried to piece my life back together. Lisa, on the other hand, stayed in the house we once shared, though it was an empty shell of our past. I dropped by occasionally to collect any leftover boxes or forgotten items, but the place never felt like a home anymore. It felt haunted, a monument to everything we lost. Every now and then, I'd run into someone from our old neighborhood, someone who had glimpsed the drama unfolding. Whispers circulated about Lisa's wild party habits, about how she was living a life that none of us could have predicted. One day, I ran into Mark, yes, that Mark, at a local hardware store. He spotted me first and approached with a hesitant look. We made stilted small talk for a moment before he sighed heavily. "Listen," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm really sorry about everything, Tom. I didn't know Lisa would, go to that extent." I just stared at him. "Go to what extent?" He swallowed, looking deeply uncomfortable. She didn't just hook up with one person that night. She was with 3 different guys. My stomach lurched, a fresh wave of nausea rolling over me. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. Sure, I knew she was going to the party, but the full reality of it, the idea that multiple men had been involved, was more than I could handle in that moment. Mark looked genuinely sorry. "I thought you should know," he added. "Yeah," I managed, my voice hollow. "Thanks." I walked away, my thoughts swirling, heart pounding. I felt sick, and also strangely relieved. Relieved that I hadn't stayed in that marriage any longer than I already had, because clearly, the Lisa I thought I knew was gone. Looking back, I can only be grateful that I found out who Lisa really was before wasting any more years on her. It wasn't easy rebuilding my life, adjusting to single parenthood, and accepting that my marriage was over. But I did it, for myself and for my kids. Sometimes Emma asks when mommy is coming back or if we'll ever all live together again. I have to sit her down and gently explain that some things in life change forever, but it doesn't mean we stop loving her. It just means we love her differently now. Ben is younger, he doesn't fully understand the reasons behind the divorce, and I can't bring myself to shatter his illusions. He knows that mommy and daddy aren't together anymore, and he's slowly adjusting, in that resilient way kids do. As for Lisa, well, her reputation in our old neighborhood took a nosedive. It turned out that the rumor mill doesn't favor someone who sleeps with half the party while their husband stays home. Mark and Jenna distanced themselves from her, likely to avoid the fallout. Eventually, word got around about the explicit footage, and Lisa became something of a cautionary tale. I still recall the moment when the final divorce decree arrived in the mail. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling a little. Reading the words on the page made my heart ache with finality, but it also set me free. There was no turning back. The life I had was over, and a new one stretched out before me. In the months that followed, I went through every stage of grief imaginable: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and eventually, acceptance. Therapy helped, as did the unwavering support of my parents, who became a refuge in my darkest hours. I returned to old hobbies: fishing, running, and tinkering with DIY projects around my apartment. It's funny how something as simple as repainting a wall can feel like reclaiming a piece of your soul. Slowly, I began to feel like I was living again, not just surviving. Financially, it was tough. I had to juggle child support, rent, and everyday expenses, even though I was granted full custody. Lisa was ordered to pay support as well, but she was rarely on time with payments. My lawyer advised me to document everything, so I kept a meticulous record of every missed or late payment. I wasn't out to bleed her dry, I just wanted stability for Emma and Ben. And yet, even amidst the stress, there was a stark contrast in my life. I was no longer walking on eggshells, no longer dreading what fresh argument or bizarre suggestion might come from Lisa. The silence in my small apartment felt oddly peaceful compared to the tension that had lived in our old house. Emma adapted by throwing herself into art projects, drawing bright pictures of me, her, and her brother, often adding grandma and grandpa into the mix. Ben quietly gravitated to my side whenever I was home. He'd sit next to me on the couch, not saying much, but I could feel he just wanted the reassurance of my presence. One night, several months after the divorce, I was tucking Emma into her new bed, in our new place, when she looked at me with her big brown eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "why did Mommy go to that party if it made you so sad?" Her voice was trembling, full of a confusion no child should have to bear. I felt my throat tighten. How could I explain something so adult, so heartbreaking, to a child? "Sometimes," I said gently, "grown-ups make decisions that hurt other people. It doesn't mean Mommy doesn't love you. She just did something that hurt our family." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and I hugged her, whispering reassurances. "We'll be okay," I murmured. "I promise." She held on to me for a long time, her little body shaking with quiet sobs. In that moment, I realized that no matter how angry or betrayed I felt, I had to be strong for them. They were the reason I couldn't afford to crumble. I had to be the anchor they needed. Months turned into a year, and the initial shock of the divorce faded into a dull ache. I finally switched jobs, something I'd been considering for a while. The new workplace gave me a more flexible schedule, allowing me to be there for Emma and Ben when they needed me most. Lisa drifted in and out of the kids' lives. She'd show up sporadically, promising to do better, to be around more, but her follow-through was inconsistent. Each time she disappointed them, I was the one left to pick up the pieces. I found myself cycling between anger and pity whenever I thought about her. Was she trapped in a spiral of self-sabotage, or did she simply not care? Either way, I refused to let her destroy me, or my kids, any further. Sometimes, I'd have nightmares of that night, the party, her sneaking off, the phone footage. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart hammering, only to see Emma's nightlight through the crack in my door, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this world, even if it felt that way sometimes. I leaned more into therapy, speaking openly about the shame, the feeling of being unwanted, the betrayal of trust. My therapist told me that such feelings were normal after a betrayal of this magnitude. It would take time to heal, but it was possible. Gradually, I believed her. I started finding moments of peace and even small joys. I remembered how to laugh without bitterness. I took the kids to the zoo, the park, the movies, making new memories in a life free from the constant tension Lisa had introduced. Looking back on it all, I can say this: I never imagined my marriage would end in scandal and heartbreak. I thought we'd be one of those couples who grew old together, content in our routines. But fate, or choices, had other plans. And maybe, just maybe, it was a blessing in disguise that I learned the truth sooner rather than later. For those out there who are watching this and nodding along, maybe you've been through something similar. Or maybe you're living in denial, hoping the cracks in your relationship will disappear if you just ignore them long enough. Take it from me, ignoring problems doesn't fix them. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is face reality, even if it tears you apart in the process. I'm not entirely sure how Lisa's doing these days. Last I heard, she was still in the old neighborhood, though people kept their distance. Her reputation wasn't exactly shining after the party fiasco. But that's her choice to live with. I've made mine. I'm not saying I'm glad it happened, no one wants to see their marriage crumble. But I am relieved to be free from someone who could look me in the eye and think nothing of betraying me in the most fundamental way. At least now, I can rebuild without secrets and lies lurking around every corner. So that's my story, my confession, if you will. It's a cautionary tale about how one night, one conversation, can unravel everything you thought you knew. Thank you for watching, and remember, trust is precious. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair.